Hello, we are two architects researchers from Istanbul who works on the subject of urban space. We are here today to present you our research that is entitled Hidden Nature in the Movement of Contemporary Architectural Space. Due to challenges in conceptualizing the complex urban context, existing dynamic spatial relationships inside are often overlooked by architects in favor of what is planned. Subsequently, inanimate conceptions of space become prominent, and movement that brings change and transformation to space is excluded from the architectural design process. This study aims to visualize alternative modes of movement and argue its effect on the perception interpretation of urban spaces by using photographic research. The structure of the research begins with the theoretical background that introduces the conceptual framework of urban travelers' bodily movement and abstract interpretations of the urban residual space. The following part explains how movement is conceptualized as a performance to explore and understand the urban space. Accordingly, Accordingly, methodology of the study is described by presenting photography as a tool for documenting and reimagining. Framing images of the urban space and perception of these images constitute the two phases of the methodology in this context. The second main part of the study includes the aerial research. This part starts with introducing the characteristics of the chosen urban residual space as terrain walk, then continued by site photography and its interpretations as the outcomes of the aerial research. The conclusion consists of inferences that comes from the aerial research, and the outcomes of aerial research help to define aspects of residual spaces related to hidden nature of movement in urban context. Finally, the opportunities that emerge by being liberated from boundary of constructed space is discussed. The conceptual framework of the research is based on the perception and interpretation of urban space through two types of movement. First type of movement is bodily movement of the urban traveler that leads to exploration of the urban residual space in the urban context and to creation of the primary image of the space as documentation. Secondary image of the space is created by an abstract movement in mental space by reimagining and creating an alternative narrative of the urban space that is based on the primary photography. For the body of the urban traveler, urban context is a topological continuity that is composed of various landforms. These landforms include both natural aspects of the urban topography, such as hills or river banks, and constructed aspects of the urban topography, such as buildings, motorways, bridges, or railroads. Furthermore, amongst this interlace of natural entities and constructed elements, other types of unplanned and unnatural areas come to sight, which can be defined as residual areas of the urban context. According to Merriman, movement is not just a passive derivative of space and time. There are inherent qualities of movement to be evaluated with, such as affect, sensation, rhythm, vibration, energy, and much more. Merriman's abstract definition can be interpreted as every movement should be considered as a transforming and creating force for its environment. To be on the move is an active state where perception of the environment occurs and meanings are reconstructed at the same time. Bodily movement and gaze of the urban traveler creates possibility of coming across to urban residual space, which is otherwise ignored or passed by. The sola moralis defined empty and unbuilt spaces with no specific function as terrain walk. Walk descends from vacus, giving us vacant and vacuum in English, which is to say empty, unoccupied, yet also free, available, and engaged. The relationship between the absence of use, of activity, and the sense of freedom, of expectancy, is fundamental to the understanding the evocative potential of the city's terrain walks. Void, absence, yet also promise. the space of the possible, of expectation. Creating photography of terrain mark enables the urban traveler to capture traces of multiple spatial potencies that leads to an urban imagination that involves what has and what can happen in that space. The second conception of movement in the study is determined as the reconstruction of movement in urban travelers' imagination as animations. This process is realized through interpretation of the photographs of the residual area. And observer's mind creates a second layer of interpretation and the subjective reading of the urban space starting off from the reference frame of the photography. Barthes relates creation of various interpretation of photographic image to audience's subjective memories, especially images of urban residual spaces that are already has no given definition and dominant figure, encourages imagination to transcend and the given and reach to various possibilities of the space to become.
Photograph is a mechanical medium in order to record the moment and represent from different local and time. The record is characterized by frozen skin. When it is compared to other mechanical image record media like cinema, the photos do not have the opportunities of moving image. Sankalia defines cities built and unbuilt residual spaces as the indeterminate background without clean-cut boundaries that are contoured by building envelopes. He also expresses that the gaze of the urban traveler leads to contemplations on the cityscape in a way to create a new understanding and transcending what is easy to grasp. The close relations of instant shots of camera and gaze of the urban traveler give the motivation for using image-based research in order to construct both abstract and particular reciprocity of research context. The positions of recorded images in methodological fragment is placed due to referring its poetic and descriptive qualifications. Thus, its reference to other abstract images, they are not directly linked to photographic objectiveness. The referentiality is used kind of a tool for reading photography record in order to be discovered and examine a thing out of its corporeal content. At first sight, referentiality emerges by the support of memory. It is placed as memory image in the methodology of survey, which is visualized over architectural drawing about initial photographic recordings of space. The structuralized process for reading photographic record is mentioned by Bergin as novel potentiality of photographic image, which develops self-method over concepts of rereading and representing. Photos are translated into other set of representation. They gain their materiality directly and implicitly from lived space. Photographic records make possible anatomizing the movement. Other possibilities of space placed in one record helps to set interrelation in non-representational context. While rereading photos altogether, it is also practiced new mediums for representations of space. It creates data fragments of survey. These are photographic records of space, components of documented space, decomposed image of documented space, architectural drawing about space, and representations of space by collage work. Reading and representing are linked together in the scope of the research methodology. Developed abstract numerous linkages connects poetic and descriptive qualifications of documented space. This endless association shows that one or more image category for referential source. Superstudio is interested as one of the example for reading and using way of photography. In Superstudio's work, photography is appeared as post-production medium example, and their way of interpreting the abstract and concrete references are put together in order to illustrate the conditions of city, the proposed concept, to give information about social cultural situations. Their representation shows how they excavate meaning about modern presences and reanimation the concept of city towards their perceptions and understandings. Photography in architecture is also used as layering novel perspective by creating fictional architectural environment. Cartography means that map making. It is the study and practice of making maps. In this method of representing place, the immaterial and materiality of photograph is used in order to look for alternative kind of motion and body relation in places. Cartographies are not so static recorded materials. It is based on early examples of representations as map to the now as alternative mode of presenting the time-space bounded experiment. The prepared cartography of instant space and wide range of possible animations of photographic record somehow determine typologies in order to unfold motions of temporality of space and time. The area that is chosen for this research spans between the railroad and walls of an urban park in inner residential areas of Istanbul. Even though it consists of two-way car road and pedestrian sidewalk, it is not directly connected to main roads and functions as a residual urban land where people, cars, trees, and animals coexist throughout different occasions. It is placed where urban travelers can come across people learning how to drive, parking their cars to attend different occasions in the park, drinking alcohol while watching the view of the park, chatting while sitting on their foldable chairs, and making their grocery shopping in the marketplace that is installed once a week at the very same place. In this area, there are catch several snapshots and four of them chosen for analysis. They all are defined by the researcher gaze. Analyses are represented by using special drawings, collage works, and decompositions of elements in space. This table is illustrated in order to remember the data gathered from the survey about residual spaces and the conditions of residual spaces in urbanity. Dark gray building mass and light gray recreational areas used open space. Red residual space in between particularly functionalized and used areas. Yellow bands shows unity which brings design and under-designed spaces. These both representation tools overlapped by supported three types of images. These three working categories for images are indicated in each slide related to each other in terms of documentation due to the image's qualities come from descriptive and poetic sense. Photographic image represent the survey about residual space and the compositions of photographic unity is used to unfold abstract impressions about space. It is worked as research tool for animation. Abstract image represent the survey about chance relation. Recompositions of fragmented photography is used to represent abstract impression about space. It is worked as tool for exploring novel relations about residual space. Spatial drawing is about relations of experiment in residual space. Memory image represent the memorized experiment and its conceptual reflection on residual space. The definition form experiments in residual spaces. In this slide, the relatedness in the residual space is shown via photographic record and memory images of space. According to symbolic interpretation, abstraction creates impulse for reconnect due to spatio-temporal continuity, flows in memory, and unity of experiments. On the other hand, abstract images are semantically show sense of alienation from appearance of space-time by disfigured, decomposed experiments and imaginary, unrealistic, insubstantial, illusionary narrativeness. The result is indicated in this table. These all images are gathered in order to conceptualize residual in contemporary space and time continuity of architectural environment. Residual spaces show that memory image and photograph image of same place is not merged together. Residual spaces create a distinction between our recognitions about experiments. Sense of distinction between impressions of space in memory and its momentary experiment is one of the demonstrations of showing concepts of psychologically habitable interval, which is interested as animations about images. Abstraction images, represented via collage, prove for how irrelevancy is occurred from space and time. Spatial relations are concepts for experiments in memory images. The sensual capacity of body also represents the positions in out through distance of events and other active limits. Functional objects create their own spatiality outside from its usage. The reverse movement in space and time are introduced in our urban life via using same standard functional places. The sense of being space and time is demonstrated via quality of public space and private properties' spatial character. The diagram shows the link between abstract image and referential experiment in memory image. The listed determination shows the explore interrelation between memory image and abstract image of residual space over explanation of how collage work is made. How abstraction is processed in the archived photographs examines under this heading. The given data below is not specifically directed and belong to the photos separately. These evaluations are gained from total practice of 4 images. Meeting by chance is concept for abstraction in photographic image. Darkened contour of figure make context abstract. The overlapped cross line creates contradictory impact. Memorized experiment is delocalized by body from space and time. The recognized detail in physical space is reused in order to break sense messes. Large green areas develop ambiguity for perceptions of differences between materials. Disfiguring space components manipulate sense of depth of space. Destroying sense of perspective transforms proper scales of objects. 3D figures are transformed into surface effect in the space. Selected sensual focal points are represented as center of space. The multiplying centers damage the clearness of recorded space. Unclear images placed in photos dark and black areas. Chance relation in space-time destroys the memory limits of memory. The repeated pattern in image creates illusionistic effect. When daily life in urban context is taught within the spatio-temporal perception, the entire relations of 3 types of data illustrates concentric unity. On the other hand, residual spaces give way to see memory and abstraction in concentric relation. These relations is represented in between situation. This is signified via red. This continuous and closed band gives face each represented images about residual spaces. This band combines and gathers physical and imaginary, material and immaterial, visible and invisible quality about space and time. And also this shows quality of residual spaces in architectural environment, such as the hybrid imagery in abstracted image provide the material and immateriality in same representation because of ambiguity of figures that is not easily reviewed by observer. The materialized dialogue in space is used to refer invisible existence which are signified the time issues before after via existed and non-existed on the continuity of observer's sense of time. The hybrid concept is labeled as dynamic action in physiological perceptions about space and time, which is represented via term animation. Both have connection with physical space and also it is separated from the corporeal linkage in architectural space. Abstract images and memory images are unfolded by animation in photographic image about sites. The non-associative image reflected via instantaneous shots constitutes records of residual spaces. They also show other sides of architectural elements by configuring them as record for archiving demand. Residual spaces bear as archived photographic image concept within urban context. Therefore, abstract and memory images, as two types of images, are unfolded by referencing of animation which comes from space, and it forms feelings of alienation throughout coincidences. The coincidences conceptualize feelings of alienation in residual spaces. This diagram reconceptualizes the hybrid concept which is appeared particularly in between memory and abstraction experiments in residual spaces. By using the two facets of red band, it is expanded to unfold the dynamic relation. When it is looked again, urban context and representations practices about residual spaces, this expanded animation is being reasonable collect under the sense of alienation from space and time. Alienation is experienced as animation in between memory and abstraction, in between residual space and used spaces. Alienation from spatial continuity is concept for animation. Animation is represented by archival record of architectural space. Specifically, it is conceptualized within the potentialities of residual spaces. Overall potentials of residual spaces are emerged due to the give opportunities for interpretations of other possibilities of movement beyond boundaries of architectural environment, interpretations of cut schemes of movement in spatiotemporal continuity to develop novel visual depthness, liberation from identification and presuppositions about spatial phenomena and disfigurations of memorized experiments, these structured perceptions about material facts create enigma in physical space. It is valuable for reformations of experimentations of watching, creating substantial linkage between illusion and enigma, the distinctive qualities of space as substantial and insubstantial overlap as if same phenomenal feature for architectural environment. The disappearing sense of distance between phenomena about space over recreated surface effects and patchwork combinations of dynamic images becomes static in residual space. It is unfolded as novel experiment as watching within our special movement that felt as alienation being in space and time.